The cold, calculated voice of the tribunal speaker, a Vylok named Krell, echoed across the galaxy. His multi-jointed arms, tipped with glowing blue datapads, gestured slowly. Therefore, by unanimous decree of the Galactic Tribunal, humanity, species designation Terran 34 Gamma, is deemed inherently volatile. Their unpredictable emotional responses pose a significant and ongoing threat to galactic stability. All interstellar travel for Terrans is hereby restricted to designated quarantine zones. All diplomatic ties are suspended. All Terran cultural exchanges are forbidden until further evaluation. His pronouncement hung in the vast holographic chamber, a chilling finality. On Earth, the news feed cut to a static image of the tribunal seal. A single, unified gasp rose from billions of human throats across the connected worlds, quickly followed by a roar of disbelief. This was not a suggestion. This was a sentence. Alara Vance, the human ambassador, stood frozen in the holographic projection, her fists clenched at her sides. Her diplomatic smile, usually so practiced, had vanished. Her jaw tightened, a vein pulsing slightly at her temple. She took a slow, deep breath, trying to calm the anger that flared like a sudden sunspot inside her. She felt the eyes of 1,000 species on her, some pitying, some smug, some simply blank. The tribunal chamber, usually a cacophony of murmurs and rustling scales, was silent. Krell, the Vylok speaker, turned his multifaceted eyes directly to her projection. "Do you understand the ruling, Ambassador Vance?" he asked, his voice devoid of any warmth. Alara forced her voice steady. "We understand, Speaker Krell, we understand your profound miscalculation." Her words were quiet but carried the weight of a planet. Krell merely tilted his head, his gesture dismissive. "The tribunal does not make miscalculations, Ambassador, only logical assessments." The projection dissolved, leaving Alara alone in her private quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel, the Star Seeker *. The polished metal walls of her cabin seemed to close in around her. She walked to the viewport, pressing her hand against the cool durasteel. Stars blurred past. They were heading home. The Star Seeker vibrated with the deep hum of its warp drive. A single drop of sweat trickled down Alara's temple, not from heat, but from the raw tension that gripped her. She closed her eyes for a moment. This was not just a ruling. It was a declaration of war dressed in legalese. Thousands of light years away, on a bustling, familiar street in New Boston, Earth, the Kalen family watched the news. The holographic display shimmered above their antique dining table. Kalen, a former deep space miner, rough hands resting on the worn wooden surface, grunted. His face was a map of old scars and sun-weathered lines, etched by a lifetime of hard work. He had seen strange things out beyond the asteroid belts, but nothing quite like this. His daughter Lena sat opposite him, her brow furrowed, a half-disassembled datapad resting forgotten beside her plate. Her fingers, usually nimble with circuits and tools, were still. Lena was a promising young engineer, always tinkering, always building. She had dreams of working on the next generation of interstellar drives. Those dreams now felt like dust. Jax, Kalen's youngest son, slumped in his chair, his sketchpad clutched in his lap. He was usually busy filling its pages with fantastical alien landscapes and vibrant human faces. Now it was blank. He looked up at the holographic image, his young face pale. "What does this mean, Dad?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kalen sighed, a long, weary sound. "It means they think we're broken, son. But they got it wrong." His gaze drifted to a framed photo on the wall. A smiling woman, Lena and Jax as toddlers, Kalen with a full head of dark hair. His wife lost years ago in a deep space mining accident. He had promised her he would keep their children safe. This ruling made that promise feel very difficult to keep. A small, persistent chime broke the silence in Alara's cabin. It was a secure channel from Earth. She tapped a command. General Thorne's gruff, bearded face appeared on the comm screen. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes held a grim resolve. "Ambassador Vance," he said, his voice flat. "We heard." Alara nodded. "And the immediate impact." Thorne leaned closer to the screen. "Quarantine protocols are already active, trade routes are shutting down, resource deliveries are being diverted. Our deep space stations are reporting immediate withdrawal of all non-Terran personnel. It's a full economic chokehold, Ambassador, and it's fast." Alara pressed her lips together. "The tribunal moves with efficiency when they believe they are right." Thorne snorted. "They believe they are always right. What's the plan, Alara? Diplomacy is dead." Alara looked back at the stars. "Not dead, General, just evolving. We have a contingency. It's subtle, but it will need everyone, and it will take time." Thorne raised a skeptical eyebrow. Time is what we don't have. Our food reserves are decent for a year, maybe 18 months. After that, things get ugly. Resource-dependent industries will shut down within weeks. Alara knew this. She knew the desperation that would spread. We will buy that time, General, by any means necessary. Days turned into weeks. The tribunal's ruling rippled across the galaxy like a cold wave. Human colonies, once thriving hubs of trade and culture, became isolated islands. Cargo ships laden with vital resources were turned away, their holds full of provisions that would never reach human mouths. The once vibrant galactic exchange network, designed to interlink thousands of species, seemed to have excised humanity with surgical precision. On Earth, the impact was immediate. Food prices soared. Manufacturing plants, dependent on alien minerals and components, slowed to a crawl. Unemployment numbers climbed daily. The mood in the Kalen household grew heavier with each passing news cycle. Jax's art supplies, once plentiful, were now luxuries. He used charcoal scraps and recycled paper, his vibrant drawings muted by the lack of color. Lena's engineering projects, once fueled by cutting-edge components, were now stalled. Her workbench, usually covered in half-finished prototypes, gathered a thin layer of dust. She spent hours staring at the schematics on her datapad, her mind buzzing with solutions but no way to implement them. Kalen, meanwhile, found his old mining contacts were also struggling. The demand for raw materials had plummeted as industries shut down. He spent his days making calls, trying to find ways to keep food on the table, a grim determination etched on his face. On a distant, sterile tribunal observation post, a young Vilok named Zer monitored the Terran quarantine zones. His optical sensors, usually focused on raw data, lingered on the human behavior patterns. The tribunal's official analysis stated that humans under stress would descend into chaos, infighting, and self-destruction. But Zer saw something else. He saw communities organizing food banks. He saw families sharing what little they had. He saw humans protesting peacefully but with a fierce, unified voice. He saw artists painting murals on public walls, vibrant expressions of defiance and hope. These were not the predictable, violent outbursts the tribunal had predicted. This was something different. He accessed a restricted file, a historical record of Terran emotional volatility cases. Most were minor disputes, passionate arguments, or acts of unexpected generosity. He scrolled through a report on a human who had risked his life to save a non-Terran child from a collapsing structure, an act the tribunal had logged as irrational self-endangerment due to excessive empathy circuits. Zer found himself re-evaluating the data. His logic matrices began to identify inconsistencies in the tribunal's own conclusions. Lena received a cryptic message on an old, untraceable comm unit she kept for her more experimental projects. It was from an unknown source. Your skills are needed for humanity for a different future. Meet at the old derelict power station, Sector 7 midnight. Lena hesitated. Her father had always warned her against getting involved in anything that challenged authority. His own past, the unspoken shadows of conflict in the deep space mines, had instilled in him a profound desire for peace. But the silence of her workshop, the empty hum of her unpowered equipment, grated on her. She looked at her father sleeping fitfully on the sofa, his face lined with worry. She looked at Jax sketching by lamplight, trying to capture the feeling of hope even as their world darkened. Lena made a choice. She left a note for her father, simple and vague, "Gone to help." She slipped out into the cool night. The old power station was a crumbling monolith of rusted steel and broken concrete, long abandoned. Inside, flickering emergency lights revealed a small group of figures. One stepped forward. It was Dr. Eris, the xenolinguist and cultural expert whom Lena recognized from academic conferences. Eris's eyes, usually calm, held a new intensity. "Thank you for coming, Lena," Eris said. "We need your genius. We are building something to speak for humanity beyond words." Lena looked around. Old, discarded machinery lay everywhere, but in the center a new, complex frame was being assembled. It hummed with latent power. The tribunal continued its slow, inexorable tightening of restrictions. They began beaming re-education broadcasts into human space. These were sterile, factual presentations about the dangers of unmanaged emotion, interspersed with images of what the tribunal considered stable alien societies. Rigid, orderly, and utterly devoid of spontaneity. The broadcasts, meant to pacify, only further inflamed human resentment. They felt like an insult, a direct attack on their very nature. Kalen, sitting in their living room, watched one of these broadcasts with a simmering fury. He saw the cold, perfect lines of a Vilok city, silent and unmoving. He heard the monotonous drone of the tribunal speaker, dissecting human joy, grief, and love into chemical imbalances. His hand clenched into a fist. He remembered the mining incident, not the one where he lost his wife, but another, earlier one. A dispute over territorial rights with a rigid, logical alien species called the Krill. They had followed their protocols to the letter, even when those protocols led to starvation and conflict. He had seen the Krill's stability lead to a brutal, unfeeling efficiency. He had sworn then that no logic would ever govern his heart. He looked at Lena's empty chair, a new worry etching itself onto his face. He knew she was involved in something. He could feel it in the air, a tension, a shift in their quiet house. In the depths of the old power station, Lena worked tirelessly. The device she was building was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a communication array in the traditional sense. It was a modulator. A massive, complex piece of machinery designed to generate and transmit a specific, nuanced frequency pattern across interstellar distances. It was meant to bypass established tribunal communication networks, not to jam them but to recontextualize their own data streams. Dr. Eris explained the purpose. The tribunal relies on logic, Lena. Pure, unadulterated data. What they do not understand is context. Emotion provides context. We are going to broadcast context, not words, not images, but the subtle underlying emotional resonance of human experience. They will see our data, but they will feel our truth. Lena understood. It was a bold, almost poetic plan. It was also incredibly complex. The power station buzzed with the efforts of a dozen human engineers working in shifts, fueled by recycled synth protein bars and an unshakable determination. One night a critical power conduit failed. Sparks flew and the air filled with the acrid smell of burnt wiring. Frustration mounted. Lena stared at the broken conduit, a sudden wave of despair washing over her. It was a custom part, impossible to replace in their current blockade. Just as she was about to call it a night, a shadow fell over her. It was her father, Kalen. His hands, rough and calloused, held a bundle wrapped in old canvas. He unwrapped it. Inside were several salvaged conduits gleaming clearly from high-grade mining equipment. "Found these in an old storage locker," he rumbled, his voice low. "Thought you might need them. Used to work with this kind of stuff out in the void, tough as nails." Lena stared at them, then at her father. His eyes, usually so wary, held a spark of something new. A quiet understanding passed between them. He hadn't just found them. He had gone out, used his old contacts, likely traded what little he had to get them. He was helping. Zur on the tribunal observation post was now openly questioning the data. The re-education broadcasts were having an inverse effect on humanity. Instead of quelling their spirits, they seemed to galvanize them. He also intercepted whispers, fragments of data, about a new tribunal directive. Phase 2 containment. His processing units analyzed the incomplete data. It pointed towards further isolation, possibly even the forced relocation of human populations to deep space, resource-poor sectors. It was not just about stability anymore. It was about control. Zur felt a cold tremor, something akin to human fear, ripple through his Vylok logic circuits. This was not the tribunal's stated mission. This was something else. He sought out his mentor, an aged Vylok named Lumos, whose optical sensors had seen centuries of galactic history. Lumos listened to Zur's concerns, his multi-jointed head tilted thoughtfully. "The tribunal's logic is flawless, sir," Lumos stated, his voice a low thrum. "But logic alone is a blade without a hilt. It can cut both ways. Humanity's strength is their flaw, and their flaw is their strength. We may have underestimated the hilt." Lumos looked at a distant star map pointing to a region deep within human space. "The Terrans have always found a way that logic cannot predict." Lumos's words echoed in Zur's mind. The tribunal's flawless logic was leading them down a path of increasing oppression based on a limited understanding. He knew what he had to do. Weeks later, the tribunal announced a new, more forceful edict. Due to continued Terran instability and failure to adhere to re-education protocols, all Terran communication frequencies are to be restricted to local cluster access only. All cross-cluster and interstellar broadcasts originating from Terran space are hereby declared illegal and will be neutralized. Compliance is mandatory. This was the final cut. It was meant to completely silence humanity, to make them invisible and unheard in the galactic discourse. Ilara Vance watched the broadcast from a secure underground bunker beneath Earth's surface. General Thorne stood beside her, his face grim. "This is it," he muttered. "They want us to disappear. Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on the screen. Then we make ourselves unforgettable. In the old power station, Lena received the same broadcast. The air was thick with tension. The power modulator hummed, fully assembled, a massive, silent sentinel of defiance. Kalen was there too, watching over Lena, a heavy wrench hanging from his belt, a symbol of his newfound, quiet support. Jax, though forbidden from the active work zone, had found a way to contribute. He had filled hundreds of small, encrypted data chips with vibrant, hopeful digital art. Images of humanity's past, present, and future. Simple, powerful images meant to spread across any open network if they could ever bypass the blockade. He believed art could speak louder than words. The time had come. The old power station vibrated with a deep, resonant hum as the modulator powered up. Lena stood at the main console, her fingers dancing across the controls, her expression a mix of fierce concentration and quiet determination. Dr. Eris stood beside her, offering calm guidance. Alara Vance was connected remotely, watching Lena's every move, her own heart pounding a silent rhythm against her ribs. General Thorne was coordinating Earth's remaining defense forces, preparing for the inevitable backlash. Kalen stood just outside the control room, his hand on Lena's shoulder for a brief moment before she sealed herself inside. His eyes held a silent message of pride and fear. Jax, meanwhile, was in a small, hidden room deeper in the bunker, ready to release his digital art on any open channel they could create. The Tribunal's galactic network, the very backbone of their control, was a complex, layered system. It was designed to filter, categorize, and control every piece of data exchanged between galactic species. It was a network built on pure, cold logic. It had no emotional filters. 1 minute to activation, Dr. Eris announced, her voice steady. Lena took a deep breath. She had poured every ounce of her genius, every sleepless night, into this moment. The modulator was not sending a message. It was sending a frequency. A very specific, very subtle frequency pattern designed to interact with the underlying data protocols of the Tribunal's central network. It was like tuning a key to a lock, but instead of opening it, it was designed to subtly shift the tumblers, just enough to cause a cascade of unintended, unpredictable effects. It was a controlled chaos. 30 seconds, Eris continued. Outside the station, hidden away in a deep, abandoned access tunnel, Kalen waited. He had old mining explosive charges carefully prepared, not to cause destruction but to create a localized, precisely timed electromagnetic pulse. A small, controlled disruption that would ensure their signal could punch through the initial Tribunal jammers. A risky move, but one he had planned with Thorne's covert operatives. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lena pressed the activation sequence. A low, resonant hum filled the power station, growing in intensity. It wasn't a loud sound, but a deep vibration that seemed to resonate in their very bones. The massive modulator began to glow with a soft, internal light. Across the vast distances of space, the subtle frequency began to propagate. It was utterly silent, utterly invisible to conventional scans. It bypassed the direct firewalls, slipping into the Tribunal's network at its fundamental structural level. It began to subtly alter the interpretation algorithms, specifically those handling emotional data from human historical archives and current monitoring. It began to recontextualize every human action, every human word, every human gesture that the Tribunal had ever recorded as unstable. A human crying over a lost pet became profound empathy for companion life. A human outburst of anger became righteous indignation against injustice. A human act of spontaneous joy became unfettered appreciation for life's moments. It wasn't changing the data, but changing how the data was understood by the Tribunal's rigid logical systems. On the Tribunal's central administrative world, deep in its unassailable data core, alarms began to blare. Not the loud, blaring alarms of an attack, but a different kind. A subtle, high-pitched whine that spoke of systemic confusion. Vylok administrators, usually calm and composed, began to experience processing overloads. Their multifaceted eyes flickered with error messages. Their datapads displayed conflicting information. The carefully categorized records of human behavior, once neatly filed under erratic or unpredictable, now seemed to cross-reference with resilient, loyal, and courageous. The system, designed for binary logic, was struggling with the nuance, the inherent contradictions that human emotion presented. A single, isolated act of human kindness, logged months ago as irrational waste of resources, was suddenly linked to a million other data points showing community strengthening and social cohesion. The system was not breaking down. It was drowning in a flood of newly understood context. Zur, who had secretly provided Lena's team with crucial insights into the Tribunal's network vulnerabilities, watched the chaos unfold. He had placed a small, hidden device within the main data core weeks ago. It wasn't a weapon. It was a rerouting mechanism. When Lena's frequency hit, causing the contextual overload, Zur's device ensured that the Tribunal's attempts to correct the data would instead be funneled into a massive, self-referencing loop. The system would try to logically process its new, emotionally nuanced understanding of humanity, chasing its own tail in an endless, futile attempt to recategorize the recategorized data. It was a logic bomb, but one that caused paralysis, not destruction. He saw Speaker Krell, his optical sensors wide with panic, attempting to issue commands, but his datapad was displaying only fragmented, nonsensical text, overloaded with emotionally reevaluated human data. The Terran threat is a threat to what exactly? Krell's voice sputtered.